Question 5. Password generator. Create a program that picks a random word from a list of 5 words. What you learn: how to work with lists of items. Research questions to ask yourself. What makes a password secure? Make a password secure, like make a password that no one might think of. So like using symbols, numbers, things like that, and not repeating the letters. How do I work with strings and characters? Since strings are text and characters are like the @ symbol, the percentage symbol, you could like combine it into a sequence that can make your password very secure. What are lists and how I use them? So lists are like a collection of variables or items. So how I use them, like for example, you have your variable apple, and then as your variable is stored in the list, you can easily use the apple thing with instead of just saying apple equals stuff like that. How can I make my program flexible and reusable? By using a certain piece of code to make it reusable. Question number 6. File organizer. Challenge. Create a program that creates a new text file and writes hello world in it. What you learn: how to create and write to files. Research questions, ask yourself. How do I work with files and folders? Python. You can work with files and folders in Python through the built-in OS and pathlib modules. What are file extensions and how do I detect them? File extensions are like what defines the file type it is. For example, .py is a Python file, .txt is a text file. And how do I detect them? Either by labeling the feature that shows the extension, or using the find command in the terminal. How can I safely move or copy files? Using the drag and drop method, or for copying files, you can use the cut, copy, paste commands. What happens if a file already exists in a destination? The file will either overwrite the existing file, prompt you to choose between overwriting or rewriting. And here's the code. With open text file is a file which will create the file, then file write, it will write up hello world, and file write, this is the second line, also write this. Then here it will say successfully wrote hello world to the file. The file has been successfully made, and here's what is written.
The password generator makes sense, sounds pretty good. For the file organizer question, can you come up with a short story with 5 sentences? For each sentence, use a for loop to iteratively create a text file and write that sentence into the file. Explain how that works too. This will help you understand for loops better and how they work, and just file creation in general. Using code, I want you to create a folder structure that resembles this. I'll send this to you via Discord too. As a third part, write code that moves every .txt file that you've created from the first one, this one, I want all these files to be .txt files. And then here, I want you to write code that moves every txt file that you've created to /text to this subfolder. And then your explanation on how to move files is incorrect. I mean, it's correct in terms of like when you're interacting with a graphic user interface with the laptop itself. But in terms of using like code or terminal commands, I want you to answer how you would copy and move files using code and terminal commands, not the drag and drop method. After you do part 3, explain that, because you'll have a deeper understanding of that too. And while you're doing these, don't just rely on AI to just get it done for you. Try and do them yourself. Ask AI for some tips, but do them yourself. The more you do them yourself, the more you actually learn. You can then start relying on AI later on once you actually learn the fundamentals. And then as a fourth part, I want you to think about and explain what happens if two programs try to write to the same file at the same time. The best thing for you to do would be to experiment with code. Try and do that. Watch what happens. Do you get any errors? If you get any errors, use AI to understand those errors. Use Google to read more about that. Read about it in detail. If you encounter something that you read about that you don't understand, pass that into AI and ask it to simplify things for you. Now, I want you to explain that back to me in your own words. Now, don't use academic explanations or things that you read online. Explain it in your own very simple words with your own examples. As part 5, walk me through what happens if you create, if your program tries to create a file where it doesn't have permissions. And you should know more about this because you try to install Cursor without the right permissions. So you should understand that by virtue of that alone. But read more about permissions in Linux, about pseudo permissions. Understand that more, and then explain that back to me again in your own words, very simple words. Use simple terms. Don't use a definition that you read. Use simple terms. And then as a sixth part, how does Python decide where to create the file? You know, for each of these questions, the best thing to do would be to first experiment with code, see how it actually behaves, study that behavior, and then read more about it, and then explain in your own words. Because once you can explain things in your own words in very simple terms, then you understand it. Good work otherwise, though.